Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me a very good professional wrestler. So, thank you for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's a very good time to have a conversation.
Yeah, I'm super excited too because you're coming off of this Warhorse match that just took place at Black Label Pro, and we're going to get to that. And I really want to talk about the last 3 years, and I do want to mention that the Super 8 tournament is coming up, the Turbo Graps is coming up, which you're going to talk about. You got a match soon, I think, at Hustlemania 3 with Lucky 13, and we're going to get into that. But I kind of want to talk a little bit about the last 3 years. And I think the best place how to start is your relationship with Mark Ancelotti. If I said his name right, because I know there's a lot of history between the two of you, going back to the
Angelo
throwback.
Setti.
Well, how is it pronounced?
Mark Angelo Setti, Mr. Touchdown Nerd. It's good.
So you have a lot of history with him, going back to tag team wrestling, all the way back to 2012. So how did that entire team form up and really wrestling with him and doing what you've done in Chikara for the most part? And I know that could be a dirty word with some people.
No, actually, my relationship with Mark actually goes back to about 2006 or 7. Initially, I was not a Chikara student. I trained at another school called Pro Excitement Wrestling out of Allentown, Pennsylvania. And they, about maybe 4 months into my training, they had Harley Race come in and run a clinic. And Mark signed up for it, but he had never trained up till that point yet. So somehow he signed up and they let him in. And about 30 minutes into this thing, somehow Harley Race found out that Mark wasn't trained at all. So the Harley Race to that response, which I learned later on, I just thought this was what a wrestling seminar was. His response was he just exercised us all to death. It was just like 200 squats, 300 push-ups, 300 E's, whatever. Um, and he talked a lot about his camp and things like that too. But we found out, a couple weeks later that because Mark showed up, that we were all kind of punished for it. But that's for the first time I ever met Mark. And I always really liked Mark. And when it came time for Mark to get an opportunity at Chikara, especially in 2010, 11, like we were one of the hottest companies around at the time. And I was pumped for him to get that opportunity and even more excited to have him on my team. Like I've always just been a big fan of his work in general. And I think it's a real shame that his career just kind of got cut short a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I do want to talk about what went on with you guys as a team because you face people like the Young Bucks, you face Team Benchmark, Night Eyes for the Pirate Guy, which is Jolly Roger and Lance Steele. You faced a lot of people like the Devastation Corporation, Blast, Massive, and Max Smashmaster, and the list can go on and on and on. You've had many bouts with Solo Darling and Willow Nightingale, I think, was thrown in there, and a variety of other people. So, what was that entire experience like? Because there's 70 plus matches. You won the Chikara tag team titles a few times, or at least once. So, what was all that like? Really having that run and being a team for 8 years and working together for that time and really being a popular team in Chikara.
It was just super enjoyable. We got to travel a whole lot together. But Mark being a guy I respect, but he's also, on that short list of real life friends that you make with inside wrestling. Like you have friends that you see at a wrestling show or things like that. But Mark's like a real life friend. Our friendship expands. It's more than just I see him in a locker room. So to be able to wrestle with a guy that I enjoy being around like that for 8 months, and even more so being able to wrestle against him. We've had a handful of matches against each other. Like that's what wrestling's all about. It's just for me anyway. Like it's never been about dollar signs and Monday Night TV and all these things. It's just been about like making memories and having a good time and enjoying myself. I mean, wrestling's not something, at least for me anyway, that I can do forever. So like to make those memories and those friends while I'm in wrestling is super important. And Mark's a guy that I'm super happy I met, even though at first it cost me about 200 squats and 300 push-ups and 300 sit-ups and whatever else I had to do because of Mark. But other than that, Mark's just a trip. He's fun to hang out with. He's fun to travel with. Great time in the ring. And like I said, super talented. There's not many guys who can check off every box the way that Mark does. He looks great. He talks great. He can wrestle great. He's creative. Like if there's a box in wrestling that you need to check, Mark checks all of them. So it was absolutely a pleasure to be lucky enough to tag with him for that long.
And to even talk about opportunity, because opportunities, you said it wasn't Monday night, it wasn't, big companies, but you had some cool moments in Chikara. And I think one of the coolest moments was at the King of Trios tournament where you, Icarus, and Mark all teamed up and you got to face LAX. And for
Mhm.
Impact, you got to face a sort of a recreation of the Spirit Squad. I think an improved Spirit Squad, might I add. And then you also got to face the Flood, which is Eddie Kingston, Jimmy Jacobs, and Vulgar. And that's kind of three matches that are probably covering a good chunk of wrestling companies that have been out there and what they're doing, both present and past. Obviously LAX is Impact, Spirit Squad is WWE, the Flood Eddie's been all over the place, and in many ways he's almost a Chikara original to some degree. So what was that entire experience like? Because I know you mentioned not Monday night, but that's kind of, I don't want to say, but it's sort of an indie moment that doesn't happen all that frequently to people and getting opportunities like that.
See, that's what I wanted to find. Like as a kid, maybe around 11 or so, like I kind of got out of WWF, which at the time was super cartoony. And as I was growing up into like a teenager, like that wasn't my interest anymore. And ECW kind of rekindled my love of wrestling at like maybe 13 years old. I still remember my cousin calling me up and saying, "You got to turn on MSG channel at 11. Turn it on, it's going to be amazing." And so, on a school night, it was Tuesday night. I would stay up and I watch it. And ECW for me was always super special because it wasn't the big company and it wasn't the millions of dollars. It was just a bunch of dudes who loved wrestling, who wanted to build something special. And that was my goal. Like I wanted to be a part of that. And for me, that's what, especially my first 7, 8 years in Chikara, that's what it was. Like every month we got bigger, and every month we drew more attention, and every month we changed the landscape of wrestling. From a tiny little company that started in Allentown, you can still see the impact that we had on wrestling to this day. Like there's no doubt. Like we changed the scene and we made it a little bit different and a little bit more special. And that's what I was looking for. And so like now it kind of leaves me in a weird place where that's not around anymore, and my safety net's kind of gone. And to be honest, I've been thoroughly enjoying it. Um, just being able to call my own shots and doing what I want to do, and really just kind of entertain myself has been my goal, and to make it fun for me. So that's where I'm at right now. And so far, man, I'm loving life.
And to talk about another match, because you're formerly known as Dasher Hatfield, for those who might not know exactly who you are, who've been living under a rock. Because unfortunately, some people have been and don't know anything about Chikara or anything what's going on with that, which we're not going to get into. But you had a very cool match where Mark was involved in it, Heidi Lovelace was involved in that, Icarus was involved in that, and you faced the Gentlemen's Club in what was Dasher's dugout. And so, what was that like? Because that's another one of those moments where you just have a massive amount of talent. You have a fun match going on, and it's kind of, I felt when I saw that match, it was in that category of having that indie moment and having a fun wrestling match.
Definitely fun, especially because those guys are all really good friends of ours. And like at the time, you can't predict the future to see like the massive amount of success that team has had. Fast forward to current day, right? We're in there wrestling Orange Cassidy and Drew Gulak and Chuck Taylor, and like these guys are all the coolest guys, the most popular guys in wrestling right now. They're the hottest guys going. So to be lucky enough to be around those guys and learn from those guys for years, is it's kind of like me stepping in a giant pile of horse crap and just getting lucky, man. Like I happen to land at a place, and to me, a lot of that goes back to how special Chikara was. Like as a company, back we were all magneted. It was magnetic. We all just wanted to be there because we knew how special it was, right? Guys like Drew Gulak and Orange Cassidy and Cesaro, like these guys don't stay there for years and years and years just for a place to work. It's because they believed in what we were doing. And that match definitely just when you get those opportunities to go in and wrestle your friends, those are the best ones. You always hit each other a little bit harder. You get a little more creative. Like it just, I think it's super. comes across when we're having a good time. Like when we have a good time, fans have a good time, and the match is more memorable and things like that. Like you can sense it. You can sense if a guy's just in there. I'm here for my whatever my payday is, and I'm just getting through this match. I can sense it as soon as I show up and start, having conversations with my opponent. Like, is this guy here to have a good time today and put on a great show, or is he just here for something to do? Um, when you have guys like that high caliber, they're always there to create memories for the fans, but also really just have a good time. Those guys love wrestling, and it comes across in everything they do.
I agree, and I've heard stories with certain companies. I'm not going to name who, and I still like the people that were involved, but they were there for a payday versus being there for the fans. And then you hear stories, and Gangrel is a great example of this, where Gangrel, I've heard so many positive stories how he is there for partially a payday, but he puts on amazing matches, and he really is there to have a fantastic match and be there for the fans more than anything else. And so I hear both sides of that. And Chikara has brought in a bunch of people that have done both of that from what I know. But now I kind of want to jump forward to 2018, which is where this gets a lot more fun. And I think 2018 was the start of you having an amazing jump out career and living up to your current name in wrestling, which is a very good professional wrestler. And so we have to talk about the history because Mark started to chase the Chikara Grand Championship. And he beat, I think, Juan Francisco of the Coronado, or in some places, the United States, depending on if he's good or bad. And then what happened to Mark during that entire process?
Mark, it was round one of King of Trios. We were going against a Beyond Wrestling team, and him and Chris Dickinson. Dickinson went to suplex Mark over the top rope to the floor, and Mark held on to Dickinson. And I don't know if he came down wrong on his ankle or Dickinson came down on it, one way or another, but he ended up fracturing a bone in his leg before he ever had a chance to defend the belt. Like he won it a couple weeks before, and it was trio, so we were obviously in the tournament. He hadn't even had a chance to defend it yet, and he ended up breaking his leg. And then the end result was like, hey, Mark, we can't wait 4 months for you to come back to defend this title. In Chikara, everything ran off points. There was somebody currently, I believe it was Travis Huckabee, who had 3 points ready to challenge Mark. They're like, hey, we can't make Travis wait 4 months. So Mark had to pick somebody to defend the title for him, and Mark chose me, which was a little weird for me because I had had 3 grand championship matches before that, and I'd lost them all. So I never actually won the title off of somebody, and it was handed to me. And I wasn't super crazy about the idea at first, but considering it was a good friend asking me to do that for him, I was happy to do it. But it was definitely a little awkward at first.
And so now you are handed the title. Are you in this circumstance? And the reason why I bring all of this up is because the history is a little wonky. Where are you now the champion? Are you the interim champion? And so, what exactly was going on with that and defending and dealing with that? Because it gets a little tricky at this point, and it's going to be clear in a minute or two to everybody. But how did that entire process work? Because now you're stepping in and you're representing, but at some point you weren't representing anymore. So when did that switch occur?
For me, pretty quickly, just because I feel like if I went into those matches, grand championship matches, not thinking that I was the champion or that I was good enough to win those matches, then I would have lost Mark's title for him real quick. Like when guys show up for a grand championship match, you're getting 110% effort on that day. So if any part of me believed that I wasn't good enough to win those matches, then I would have lost them. So I had to buy into kind of my own hype a little bit that I was the champion, and maybe the problem that arose from that was, I found a whole lot of success. I defended his title 5 or 6 times before he decided he wanted to come back and take it away. And maybe at that point, considering he had defended it 0 times and I had defended it 5 times, like at that point, I kind of think it's mine. And I had no problems, wrestling for it. But I did have an issue with, like, I'm not going to start at 0 points and then have to earn 3 points, even though I just defended this belt 5 times. Like, I felt I earned a right to hold that title. I'm not going to argue that Mark felt the same way. It was his and he never lost it. So we came up with a fair way to figure out who the champion was, and I won.
And so, what was that like? Because I believe it was a ladder match. I believe
It was
this
WrestleMania weekend.
exactly. Let's talk about that because obviously Mark comes back. He wants his title back. You don't want to give it up. I don't know who was the director of fun at that time, but clearly you guys came up with a solution. You got this ladder match that took place during WrestleMania weekend. There was all these other shows going on, so there was a lot of attention as is on wrestling, and you sort of have a spotlight to have this match. So what was that like? And you're wrestling a friend and somebody that I would imagine you have some respect for.
Yeah, a whole lot of respect for him. A whole lot. He's one of the best competitors I've ever been in the ring with. Super nerve wracking for me. I'm not super wild about getting hit with random objects. Like I'm still kind of a tough guy in a wrestling ring, but I'm a professional wrestler. I don't really want to get hit with chairs and ladders and tables. And, like if I wanted to be a hardcore death match kind of guy, I'd have went that route. Not taking anything away from those guys, but that's not for me. So like I knew going into a regular wrestling match, like I had Mark's number, and this is a little bit of a different situation. I'd be lying if I said I didn't lose some sleep getting ready to go into that match, just because I knew what I was going to have to put my body through, in order to leave there with the title. And the end goal was to leave with the title, and that's what I did. So I made it happen. I stepped up when I had to, but I'm in no hurry to do that again.
And it was a pretty good match. I enjoyed it thoroughly. It was one of my first Jakara matches that I've ever seen live. And it was sort of a breakout moment of you becoming a heel. The crowd was definitely not happy with you in that match. And I think it was very much an amazing story. I think it was a great match. And I also think that it was a big step for you. So, how do you feel about all of that and that match? Because I feel that we kind of took a sharp right that threw you out even further into a spotlight. And I think it solidified you defending the title for Mark, and it made you almost be taken serious to some degree in with this champion that now it's sort of earned to some degree.
It's something that I'm a firm believer in, and it took me years in wrestling to realize this. At least for me, I feel like wrestling needs to be a very just the decisions you make. You need to make them selfishly. Let me put it that way. Like when the day comes that I hang my boots up, or as I grow older, like every bump that I take, every ache, every pain, like I'm the one who's going to deal with all of that. So there's no sense in me wrestling for anyone else but myself and my immediate family, like the people who sacrifice for me, my wife, my kids, those kind of people. The people who miss me when I'm gone on the weekends, they deserve that too. But outside of that, like this is my journey, and I want to handle it the way I want to. And at first, um, just getting over with the fans was enough for me to meet my goals. Is hey, I want to be on a really good company, and I want people to be happy that I'm there. And being Dasher Hatfield, goofy baseball guy, kind of did that at first. But after a while, that loses its luster, and you're like, hey, like I'm not happy just being here. Like I want people to know I'm one of the best guys here inside of that ring. That's what I train for. That's what I take hour and a half trips each way to Philly for all of the time. So that I can train to be one of the best wrestlers in the world, not just a guy who's getting by on, a goofy look and some silly spots. And I think that match definitely set that precedent. I mean, I'd been trying to set it for years before that, but that match was it. If you watched it, I know you have, but if anyone hasn't, you can go watch it and you can see what my abilities are inside of a ring outside of a goofy look and some silly spots. But yeah, it was a big day for me. Super excited how it went, that I left with the belt, and that I proved to the world I'm one of the best wrestlers in the world.
Yeah, I agree because I think that match definitely changed your career, and I think it's brought you to this point along with another feud outside of the Grand Championship, and that's with Boomer Hatfield and Molly McCoy. I think McCoy, right?
Yep,
I think I got that right. And
it's my
so,
good niece, Molly.
what is Molly? I missed that.
Oh, I just said she's my niece.
And I've seen Molly wrestle at Flying V, and it was a great match against Erica Lee. And so to
She's a
talk
tough
about
chick, man.
this,
She's a tough chick for sure.
and so to talk about this, What was that like formulating Boomer Hatfield, Molly McCoy, wrestling with them? Because the three you were wrestling in King of Trios, and this kind of sparked a feud between you and Boomer in a very interesting way. And I think this also is kind of the evolution of your character and where you are right now. And I think it's going to come out even further in a few minutes when we talk about Warhorse.
I mean, well, I'll start with Boomer because it started with that. Like, he grew up watching his dad wrestle. That's what he knew. So when the day came and he said, "Hey, this is what I want to do, Dad," like, who am I to tell him no? I know his mom wasn't super pumped about the life decision. Um, there was definitely the "Hey, you're going to go to college as well" conversation. Wrestling's no surefire meal ticket for anyone, so you will have a backup plan. But it was super special to see him in a ring, training even at first, doing his first ring cruise, driving him down to the Wrestle Factory. Like all that stuff was super special, and then to be able to tag with him a little bit. Um, but then, I mean, then the day came where, and this is a tough day, I think, for a dad, where your son wants to be a man and he wants to make his own decisions. And a lot of people got mad at me, I guess, for the way I handled it, um, which maybe I didn't handle it exactly the best possible way. But that was my way of letting him know, like, hey, from this point on, whether it's a Chikara locker room or whatever locker room we're in, you're another guy on the show. Like, if it's Christmas dinner, it's whatever, and we're at home, you're still my son. But as far as in the pro wrestling world, like, you're a big man now, and you're gonna make your own decisions. And if we, cross paths in a wrestling ring, I'm gonna treat you like I would treat anybody else. And that means I want to win. I'm a very competitive person, and I would expect nothing less from him. Um, Quickly, our paths did cross, and that was his day. And I mean, bitter losing to my son, but at the same time, proud of him, right? And people try to rub it in my face a little bit, like, you got beat by your son, da 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, but that's like a notch in my belt too, because I raised him. I instilled that work ethic in him. You know what I mean? That confidence he has, that comes from the way he was brought up. Um, and without that upbringing, he would have never beat me. So like I kind of get credit for beating myself if you think about it that way. But he's in the end, I still love him, and he's super talented. He's super hardworking, and I'm like, it's kind of cool that when my days in the ring are up, I still get to watch him, and that's kind of cool.
And so, what is that like for you? Because you answered part of it, but I'm even curious further that you have your niece is in wrestling, your son's in wrestling, and they're both successful. And you got to team up with them, and now it's a family affair. To put it to the best word I could think of to describe it. And it lasted for a little bit. So what was that like? Because that doesn't happen in wrestling. You know, when we think about dynasties in wrestling, there really are very few, and it's even fewer on the indies. I can't think of another indie dynasty off the top of my head. And so I'm just curious from a personal position as a father and as an uncle what that means for you, because this is so niche to some degree.
It just like it makes me very proud. It makes me kind of pleased with myself that what I was doing, they were paying attention to, and they enjoyed it, and they wanted to be a part of it, and that I could kind of help open those doors for them. And not a lot of people, when they first start in wrestling, get to start in a well-known company. I know I didn't myself. I started in a company that had a really short run. It didn't last a long time, and not a lot of people, even to this day, still know it existed. Um, but now, like, I get to sit back and offer help when they need it or when they ask for it. Definitely Molly, more so than Boomer, comes my way asking for help and advice or some training. But I just get to sit back and watch their ride now. Like at my age, I definitely have more matches behind me than I do in front of me. So it's cool to just watch them grow as wrestlers, as talents, and see where they take it. Maybe they go a lot further than I did. Sky's the limit for them.
And now I want to dive a little bit more into the Boomer feud because there's a lot of stuff that went into it. I thought it was amazing storytelling, whether it's intentional, whether Boomer needed to be disciplined, needed respect driven into him, is up for everybody else to determine if they want to go back and watch this story developing. But this kind of started in that gauntlet match and a few King of Trios matches. And so, what was that gauntlet match like? Because it was kind of a very cool moment And I felt that a good part of the Jakara locker room respected that feud because people were coming out, just so everybody understands, and correct me if I'm wrong, where it was a gauntlet match. And so I don't know if Boomer came out, I don't know if you came out first, but basically people were coming out, people were eliminating them. When Boomer and you were in the ring alone, you two eliminated a few people together, and then a bunch of the other people were coming out, I think 3 or 4 of them, didn't even enter the ring as the two of you were dealing with whatever was going on. So what was that like? Because it's a very cool moment. It's a really cool crowd response to that moment, and I've never seen anything like that.
Well, I think for us, it was more so for him. I think it was his chance to kind of like test his britches against his dad for the first time. Like he's been in the gym, he's been training, he's been working hard. It's like, all right, I got to get in there and test what's the gap between me and my old man. How close am I to actually being able to top my dad? And I was like equally as excited to see where he was in that that range, like to kind of gauge how far he's grown from his first couple bumps up until that point. And then the interesting thing being, as you said, like the next 3 or 4 people came out, they just grabbed a seat in the front row. Also curious just to see what happens. Like if you interfere in that moment, you're interfering in family business. And I think they kind of got that. And they were just real curious to see like what happens when a dad and son get in the ring. Like, does the dad beat him up? Does the dad not beat him up? Like everyone was just kind of sitting on the edge of their seat. Somebody was eating popcorn, I think maybe the Cajun Crawl dad had some popcorn. It got a little nuts, but I think more than anything else, curiosity got the best of everybody that day, and they just wanted to see if the sparks were going to fly with me and Boomer in the ring during the Infinite Gauntlet.
And I also feel that it's somewhat a sign of respect. You don't interfere with family businesses is a good way to put it as well. Where I think
Yeah,
people respected
oh,
you in the
let
locker
us have.
room. People respected you in the locker room. I think people were starting to respect Boomer as well during that moment, and also curiosity because we're all cats and we're all curious. And eventually this led to the mask versus mask match. I don't know how you feel about Cindy Bacabella. You know, he might be
Love
somewhat
Cindy Buck.
responsible for this.
Sydney's the best.
Oh, I love Cindy too. His commentary is fantastic. But what was that mask versus mask like? Just even thinking about it because it came up. You know, he's the director of fun. He throws it out there, and then we now have something that actually means something. Because I've seen plenty of wrestling matches where, and I'm not going to say what, but it was a big event by a company that has 3 call letters. Just saying that they messed up a match that could have meant something, and this match meant something. SummerSlam. Oh, I'm sorry, I have this terrible allergy. But what was that like? Getting back to the more serious side of that mask versus mask match because it meant something.
The worst part of it was like the 3 or 4 days leading up to it. My wife, Boomer's mom, did not talk to me at all. It was like cook your own dinners, iron your own clothes. Like she couldn't believe that this was happening and we were going through with it. Um, I'm a firm believer sometimes where when you have a little beef with somebody, related or not, like sometimes punching each other a few times solves the whole problem. Like you get it all out, it all happens, and we can all move on with our day. Um, Part of me going into it also felt obviously the outcome didn't work this way, but I kind of felt like I wanted to take his safety net away. Like it is, I thought it was very safe for him to come out and be Boomer Hatfield and have a mask like Mayan and look like his dad, and it definitely would help jumpstart his career on the Indies as far as people knowing who he is and what he's about. And I kind of wanted to take that away. And instead, it happened to me, and then I had to figure out what was next for me. But I wanted to see him stand on his own 2 feet without the legacy his dad built for him, and just let him run with being himself. But he got the best of me that day. I won't make any excuses for it ever. Like I said, he works his tail off. He's just as hardworking as I am, if not harder. And that day he got me. And in the end, I was super, super proud of the fight he put out that day.
And I also feel with this match, and Molly also came out, and the fact that Boomer couldn't take the mask off was amazing story. And I thought it was so good. And I am disappointed because I felt like there was a next chapter that should have been written. And obviously things happened, COVID happened, and I felt that there was another chapter to occur between the two of you because there's still somewhat unresolved business to some degree. And so, what was that like? Because I thought that was even more brilliant than the match itself, giving Boomer and putting Boomer over and getting him 2 feet to stand on, and no disrespect to him in any regard, but I felt this match kind of gave that to him. But and even the ending to it and the afterwards was brilliant, just brilliant in wrestling altogether.
To me, this goes back to being selfish a little bit, but he earned the right that day to take my mask off. That's a huge deal in wrestling, and not every wrestler earns that at some point in their career, right? We know it's a much bigger thing in Mexico than it is here in the United States. So it's even more rare here. And that was a moment that he earned and he deserved. And I was a little disappointed he didn't have the guts to do it. Like, hey, man, you worked your tail off for this. You were the better man today. And so now, like, come claim your reward. And so that's the only thing about that whole match that I was disappointed in was just that he didn't have the guts then to claim his prize. And maybe you can see that come out a little bit at the end of the match. And I know I verbalized something like that similar to him. But that's how I was feeling in the moment. It was like, hey, you worked for this, you earned it, now take it.
It was definitely an intense moment. I don't know anything like it, but it was definitely a very very cool wrestling moment. That entire thing, and as I stated, I think it was just as important as the match itself and that entire dynamic. And it was, I thought it was truly brilliant, and I think you put it really well. And I'm not coming from a wrestling angle, I'm coming as a fan into this, and it was an intense moment. And I don't know how intense it was in the ring, but for everybody watching, and I was watching on a computer, and I can't imagine what it was like in the fans and in the crowd. So that's just my perspective, and I really do recommend everybody to watch that match. It's a really good starting match, I feel, to watch in that promotion. And so that's just how I feel with all of that. And so I think, but I also think that this and unmasking has now opened up a variety of opportunities for you that are coming up. And I kind of want to dive into some of this and talk about sort of recreating yourself a little bit, because you were Dasher Hatfield, this baseball loving, wrestler. You had Dasher's dugout, and obviously you were part of the throwbacks, which is very much football, very much sports oriented. Can't speak today. And so, what was that like, stepping out of that shadow and having to create this new identity and being unmasked?
The first match afterwards was a little nerve-wracking going into it. I was wrestling Mick Moretti at the Wrestle Factory for the Grand Championship. So it was definitely a little like, I don't even know, almost surreal that it was happening, that I was about to step through a Chikara curtain with no Dasher Hatfield mask on, which had been a nightmare I've had multiple times in real life. Like, I'll have this nightmare where I'm in the ring and all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, my mask isn't on. And then my nightmare, Quack is always standing right at the curtain staring at me like, hey, you idiot, you just went out without your mask on. And so, like, probably 3 or 4 times right before I went through that curtain, I'm like, no, I'm not supposed to have it on. But after I was out there, it kind of felt like that's how I belonged. Um, like, the mask for me was a safety net I held on to for way, 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 way too long. And I was at a point in my career where I didn't need it anymore, and I could kind of rely on myself. I didn't need a gimmick or a shtick any longer to be a dominant force in professional wrestling. So again, yeah, my safety net's gone, and it's put up or shut up time. It's, can you do it or can you not? Do you belong here or should you go home?
And do you feel that once that mask was removed, because I felt watching, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I felt that the intensity increased in many ways. I felt that you could see the confidence coming off where I also felt like, and I don't mean to some of the silliness, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I felt some of the silliness was off, and I felt that you started to look like a real grand champion more so than ever before. And I also felt like this was like, oh, this is what, this is supposed to look like. And he's actually almost elevating the title to some degree.
The Dasher persona, everything around it was created by Chikara fans. Like the whole idea for that was Chikara fan created. So I always felt like while wearing that mask, I needed to be wrestling for the fans who created me and helped elevate me and gave me that platform month in and month out to perform on. I always felt like I owed them something. And for me, losing that mask was kind of like symbolism for I've paid those dues. I no longer owe anybody anything. It's now time to wrestle for myself. And I feel like while wrestling for the fans of Chikara or any promotion I was at, like I could never really reach 100% because I wasn't doing it for myself or for my own reasons. Losing that mask now, like I'll do what I want when I want, and I'll wrestle where I want, and I'll wrestle how I want. Um, and it's all at the end of the day to put a smile on my face and to say, hey, like all my efforts or all my family sacrifice, like that's worthwhile. It's worth something to me. And if there's somebody else, like I know right away when I had the new name change, some people didn't like it. And it's like, I really don't care. Like you don't, outside of buying a ticket for a show, you don't sacrifice for me on a day in, day out basis. So I'll call myself what I want.
Well, I like the name change. When I told my friends who I was interviewing, who know nothing about wrestling, they sort of laughed, and then I corrected them and say, "Well, it's kind of true, your name." So, and I like it. I think it's great, and I think it's smart, and I think that
I say it's more of a reputation than a name.
that works for me as well. And so I happen to like this, and I think it's really really smart branding. And to talk about that, because obviously Chikara shut their doors. I don't think we need to rehash the entire problem with it. You're more than free if you'd like to shoot on it. No quorums, whatever. Either way, but I want to talk about what's going on right now more so than anything else because you're coming off of an amazing match that I think is the next chapter and the next era. And we talk about how you're wrestling for yourself now. And that Warhorse match at Black Label Pro, Eric Stevens presents wrestling, and that show was great altogether. And I thought that your match stole the show. And so, how did that match come about? Because it was a title match. You're going up against Warhorse, who's one of the most popular wrestlers on the Indies, and you're in Black Label's return show after several months. So, what was that like? Coming out, no mask, and doing it for you and not for anybody else.
To me, that started maybe back in April, where I really felt like when wrestling came back, like was my opportunity to finally get rid of people calling me underrated. People call me that all the time. Oh well, he's silly this, but he's really an underrated wrestler, and it's like that would drive me nuts. And so I'm like, all right, well, what can I do that can eliminate that forever? And well, I answered myself with win the independent wrestling championship. If I have the belt that covers all of the independents, right? There's the proof that I'm the best, right? I don't need to say it. Nobody's going to call me underrated. And so back in April or May-ish, I started planting seeds through Twitter or wherever else that I wanted a shot at Warhorse. And then I started kind of looking at how many defenses he's had and how many of those guys was I more deserving of that shot. And it really kind of started to tick me off a little bit to where it's like, why are all these guys getting this opportunity and not me? And again, this is a selfish mode where I kind of went into business for myself and went online and said, hey, I want this match. Like Warhorse, if you're the best, by the time we get out of quarantine, you would have months to rest your body after 38 defenses, which is impressive, right? But your body's got to be beat up pretty badly after that. Like now I want you at 100%. Like go to the gym, whatever. You have a month's warning that I'm coming. Um, Unfortunately for me, I didn't get the win. So all of those things I wanted to prove, I haven't quite proved them yet, but there's another day. The sun will rise tomorrow, and we will try it again.
And let's talk about this match because you came off really hot at the start of this match. It was intense. I don't think anybody was expecting that fire coming out of you and that heat. And I think you brought Warhorse to a whole new level. And I think there has been maybe one or two other title defenses that were at that caliber. And I really believe this, where it was wild. There was many close calls. I definitely thought there were moments in that match where you were going to win, and it was a phenomenal match. And there were close calls, like there were like 2.5, 2.25 pins by you on him. And so, what was that like? And really bringing that fire, because it was not just his 39th title defense. It was Black Label's return show. It's SummerSlam weekend. There was a bunch of other shows that were happening, so it was very much a wrestling centric weekend. And then you're in BLP, which is notoriously known for amazing wrestling. So what was all that going on and just that entire match? Because I thought it stole the show.
Thank you, man. But to me, I wanted it to end in like the first. If you watch like the first minute, my plan kind of went exactly the way I wanted it to, where I wanted to get in his head a little bit, right? I wanted to get him fired up and get him headbanging and get him doing his thing because I don't believe he's the smartest guy in the world. So I knew I had that advantage. And then I wanted to grab a quick roll up and stack him up on his shoulders and beat him. And it happens perfectly, but he kicked out at like 2 7/8. I hit him with a schoolboy. He was trying to shoulder tackle me, and I perfect little schoolboy man. And I thought I had him. I thought I caught him off guard, and that was my plan. Um, and I think he felt it for a moment, like you said, it upped the Warhorse's game a little bit and brought out some intensity. That might have been the first time he felt like, oh man, I almost just lost this thing, and we're only 45 seconds into that match. Um, Not that he felt outmatched at that point, but he definitely felt outsmarted. Um, Black Label Pro is a special company for me, big time. Mike Blanton, the guy who runs it, is a guy who's believed in me for a long time. Um, and I would never want to disappoint Mike. He's always given me opportunities. He's let me wrestle some of my heroes. C.W. Anderson being a big one, like I'd mentioned already, my love for ECW. So for those things, I'll always be grateful for Mike. So whether it's the return show, Eric Stevens show, whatever, like I'm always going to give my best effort on any show, but even more so for Mike. Like I feel like I owe him that much. Um, I'll say I was kind of calm going into it. I thought I'd be a little nervous, but for the first time in my wrestling career, I feel like I'm comfortable in my own skin and just being myself and wrestling my style. I did have a warm up match the week before against Cheeseburger at the Let's Hang Out shows at the drive-in, so I got to go out and be a very good professional wrestler for the first time. So all of those nerves and those little butterflies were gone, and I felt like in front of the IWTV crowd, it was my coming out party to the world. Like, hey guys, I'm here, and I'm not going away for a long time.
And Warhorse, just to make this clear, because I like Warhorse. He follows me on Twitter, which I truly appreciate before he was bigger than anybody else. He's one of those guys that's kind of an indie bucket list for a lot of people. I don't know if you have an indie bucket list, but he's obviously going somewhere and he's going to be somewhere sooner rather than later. And so there are not that many opportunities for people coming up. I believe this to wrestle him. And I think that looking back, a lot of people who got to wrestle, especially during these title defenses, I don't want to say they're going to be etched in history, but they're definitely going to be, it's going to be one of those moments and it's going to be one of those things where it's like, oh, I got to do this when he was on the rise up and getting into a certain place. So, what is that like for you? Because I think it's clear to anybody who's into wrestling that he's one of those guys that's young enough that he's going to be relatively signed somewhere sooner rather than later.
For me, that sucks. Kind of. I'll be honest. He's on a Goldberg like tear, right? If I forget what the number is, I know it's 39 defenses, but some of those were like multi-man matches. So in his reign, he's already defeated 50 plus people. I didn't want to be another name on that list. I wanted to be the guy who put a stop to that list. That's still my goal right now. Like I don't know what I got to do to earn another shot at Warhorse, but I'd still like to be that guy for sure. So just having my name on a list of 50 plus people who got beat, by the hottest wrestler on the independents right now, like for me, that's not good. That sucks. That's no longer the expectation. The expectation is to be the guy who stops that.
And we're going to talk about something that might earn you a spot back on challenging him, but I do want to table it because I think it's relevant to bring this up now, and that's COVID. And obviously, COVID-19 has messed up a lot of stuff. It's shined lights where lights were never ever shined before. Anybody can interpret that where they want to. There's legitimately a million answers to that statement across the board on a lot of ways. But people really haven't wrestled. And you said that you were at that Wrestling Cheeseburger, and then Warhorse was kind of your second match back. And I don't know when you exactly stopped wrestling, but for a lot of people, it was mid March or end of March. Mania weekend was completely cut out. And so, how has COVID-19 affected you in that time off? Because we hear people say that you need time off sometimes, and people need time to heal because wrestling is very much bumps and intense, going off the rings, guys. It hurts and it can hurt. And so, how did COVID affect you personally in wrestling?
Positively, I guess, wrestling wise, just because I took that time and it was kind of my goal outside of spending time with my kids. Um, the normal wear and tear of life in my house was getting pretty brutal between like I have a career outside of wrestling. My kids are boomers out of the house now, but my other kids are very active in sports. So we were very much like go to work, get home, start running. Like I'm at the gym 4:30 a.m. just so I can do all the running afterwards. And so like when it started, those were my two focuses, which were get myself in the best shape of my life, which is pretty impressive if I don't say so myself, because I was already in really great shape. But oh man, am I in better shape now? I started running a whole lot, so my cardio is through the roof, which I'm really pumped for because I do have two major tournaments coming up, and cardio is a big part of that. But it was just, yeah, it was exercise, fitness, eating healthy, and spending time with my kids because like I can only control what I can control, right? It's my circle of control. This is what I can worry about and stress about. And I could say, hey, we're going to be stuck in the house for months together and we can't go anywhere. And we could sit around and whine and complain about it. Or we can make the most about and because when life gets back to reality and everything's normal, like I'm going to wish I had days to just sit home and work out and hang out with my kids. I'd pay for it. So definitely made the most of it during COVID. Um, as soon as possible, I was training back in a ring. I went down with Cheeseburger for a little bit here or there. There's actually a ring not too far from me, right outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania, that you can get into every once in a while. So I made sure I did that before my matches with Cheeseburger or Warhorse, just in case there was any ring rust. But really, there wasn't. It was, riding a bike, man, right back to it, along with, some extra wind. 15 minutes into my match with Cheeseburger, I'm laying and I'm like, hey, this is the part normally where I got to dig deep for some wind a little bit, some energy, and it was there. I was ready to go. So, I mean, outside of all the terrible things that COVID has brought just into the world, I feel I made the absolute most out of my time away from wrestling due to COVID.
And then I want to talk about the other side of COVID. And I'm a fan. I haven't been to a wrestling show since Prime Time Wrestling back in March, and I didn't feel comfortable at the beginning of March. And obviously, I think Black Label Pro had very limited fans, or no fans. I don't remember exactly.
30, they sold 30 tickets. Chairs were spaced out, masks were required, sanitizer was everywhere, the ring was sanitized. People weren't allowed to move their chairs. It was like, say you and I bought tickets together, there were two chairs, 6 foot radius around it. So Mikey's a professional. He made sure if he was running, it was going to be as safe as possible.
Because I know that a lot of shows are taking place outside. GCW is doing a lot of shows outside. ICW is doing a bunch of shows outside, and they just instituted a new policy for their shows for No Holds Bars Volume 6. And then I know that Beyond has done stuff outside. And so I'm just curious because I only know what I see on IWTV. and I know where I stand comfortable wise. And so I'm just curious where you see wrestling going with COVID, because obviously this thing isn't going away. I don't want to alarm anybody if they're watching, but this is going to get a bit more complicated as we start heading into colder weather and what happens in the fall if it respikes. And so I'm just curious how you view it from the wrestler's perspective looking out versus my perspective as a fan looking in.
So I think it's all in how we handle it. If people are running the way Mikey did, and he didn't get obsessed with making money, people would have paid whatever to go see a wrestling show after COVID, especially with the talent that he books. But he's like, I can safely fit 30 people in this building. That's what I'm sticking to. Could he have sold another, 100 tickets at a higher price value? Absolutely, he could have. And maybe there's people, I don't want to say stupid enough to jam pack themselves in a building, but there probably are. But he did it as safe as possible. And as long as people keep making those types of decisions, I think we'll be all right. Like, are we going to be wrestling in front of 10,000 people anytime soon? Probably not. But we will still have wrestling in some form or fashion. But it really comes to fans being smart and keeping their masks on, promoters being smart and not cramming a lot of people into an itty bitty space. If we appreciate having wrestling, then that's what we'll do. The minute there's an outbreak at a show and 20 people are like, hey, I got COVID at this wrestling show the other day, right? It probably halts, slams the brakes on everything. So we just need to continue to be smart. And it's one of those things where it's your life and your decision. So if you don't feel comfortable, like you said, you're watching on IWTV, well, that's great too. IWTV is a great platform to have right now, right? You're still supporting indie wrestling. Like, all of those things are still happening, and you're doing it from the safety of your own home. So if that's your comfort zone, then that's how you roll, man. And that there's nothing wrong with that. If you're like me, and I'll even call myself stupid a little bit, like I happen to have like a He-Man complex where I'm like, nah, I'll be all right. Like I kind of think I'm invincible a little bit. I have a great wife who tells me I'm not quite often and reminds me that I'm just human. Um, if you're like me and you're more adventurous and you want to go out to a show, then hopefully it is outside, and hopefully they are following guidelines as far as social distancing go. We just need people to be smart and make good decisions. That's it.
And I'm glad you brought up IWTV because I think that is an amazing outlet. I think that things are now starting to return. I think things are starting to now be picked up and streamed a lot more on IWTV. And they just added that tournament, or one of the tournaments you're going to be part of, and that's the East Coast Wrestling Association, the ECWA Super 8 tournament, is now going to be streamed on IWTV, which is great, especially during this time and what's going on in the world, and how some people don't want to go to a wrestling show, and not because they don't like wrestling, but people don't feel comfortable anymore. And I think that's the biggest hurdle with wrestling and tickets and all of entertainment that's publicly out there is comfort level. But let's talk about that tournament, because that tournament, it's also known as, I believe, the Super 8 tournament, is a well known, well respected, extremely important tournament. A lot of young guys have come out of that tournament and done some amazing stuff on the indies, and a lot of people have been discovered because of that tournament. And you're in a weird position because you have to sort of reinvent yourself, and you lost your safety net. And I think the safest way how to say this is that you lost your home promotion. I think is a fair statement to throw out there. So you have experience, but you're almost starting new to something. So what is that entire experience like? Because this is a big deal, and this is a big spotlight. And then for it to be on IWTV, I think adds further coverage to it. And that was just announced maybe a month ago.
Initially, the Super 8 was supposed to take place back in March and then again in June, and this is now the third time it's been moved to September. And at first, I think I was just kind of enamored with being invited. Like, only the best wrestlers, the top indie guys, historically get invited to this thing. So at first I was like, all right, I'm doing something right. Like, I got invited to the Super 8. But then as COVID went on and my expectations of myself grew higher, and even to go back with now just being another name on the Warhorse list, like, just being invited isn't good enough. If I'm trying to prove to the world just how good I am, and I don't ever want anybody ever to tell me how underrated I am again, I need to give you some kind of evidence or some proof to say, underrated, that guy won the Super 8. Like, you don't underrate the guy who wins the Super 8. So right now, that's my mission, to make sure I'm prepared for Super 8, win Super 8, and then right off into Black Label Pro the next month, and win another tournament. Like, win everything, win it all. That's the
Yeah,
goal.
and I think that it's gonna be a good tournament. I don't know exactly who's in it, but I think Matt Tremont is in there also, and I think there's a few other people.
Matt Tremont's in there. Ricky Reyes is in it. Vinny Pacifico is in it. Chris Rockwell, KGB, I believe, is in it. And there's two other people I'm missing.
And so what is that like though? Because I know you say you want to win it, and it's not good enough anymore just to be invited, but it is to some degree a sign that you're doing something correct in the wrestling world to be part of it. And I don't want to diminish that because winning is important, but even being considered to be in the top 8 or the top 12 on the indie scene is super important right now. And I think indies are getting more and more popular, and there's a lot more attention on the indie scene right now. And so to be in a spotlight that is specifically designed for this is kind of something that must make you feel that despite everything bad that's happened since the start of 2020, this is a good position to be in.
Yeah, definitely in a good position. It's an opportunity I had to earn. That I know. I did something right, work ethic wise. However, I spent my efforts trying to be the best professional wrestler I can be. Something is working. Um, the invitation to the Super 8 tells me that. But again, winning it right now is my only interest. I've already gotten the invitation. I'm already in. So there's no need to focus on that as a goal anymore because that's achieved. Check it off the list. So now the goal is win the Super 8, go down in history as one of the very few winners of Super 8. And if you look at that list, it's a crazy impressive list of professional wrestlers.
And you mentioned the other tournament, and this is one of my favorite tournaments in wrestling, and that is Black Label Pro's Turbo Graps. And I think you're entry 8, which numbers really don't matter per se. It's
Now,
just a gimmick.
16 wrestlers. I'm number 8.
It's just a gimmick for them to do social media for the most part. And then usually, but I think Kurt Hawkins is going to be in there. I think Effie was announced. I am not sure who else has been announced as of
Uh,
lately, but
JD Drake was announced today. Chris Bay was announced today. Um, off the top of my head, I think there were 6 of us because I think they only announced 1 and 2. And then they announced 6 of us today.
yeah, and so obviously there's a lot of cool people in that, and that's a
Ethan
cool.
Page was announced today.
So yeah, so what is that like to get that invitation in there, and then also the fact that that tournament is an insane tournament. That tournament is a crazy tournament. The last one was wild. Just to give an idea here, a full circle. The last time they had this tournament, Warhorse won. Eric Stevens won the IWTV title that tournament, and then Warhorse beat Eric Stevens, I think, in the final of that to win that tournament, from my understanding. And so clearly, a lot of stuff happens, and there's a lot of matches. It's usually divided over 2 shows on what happens, and so it's just a crazy tournament, and it's some of the best wrestling in the Midwest comes out of that. So what is that like for you, knowing that your goal is to win and you got some serious competition ahead of you?
If you look back through the accolades I've collected in pro wrestling, they're all within that Chikara bubble, right? Grand champion, Campeones de Parejas. I won 2 Infinite Gauntlets. I won a Cybernetico. All of it under that same bubble. Like, now's my time to go out and prove to the whole world that I can hang outside of that bubble. Like, I've lived within that safe bubble for too long. And to go and win either or both of these tournaments lets the world know, hey, I'm here. I'm for real. I want to wrestle. I want to wrestle the best in the world, not just the best in Philadelphia. That's what it means to me. It's giving me a platform or an opportunity to show the world just how good I am against the best wrestlers in the world, not just the best wrestlers in a company.
And also, I think another place that's going to kind of help and confirm this is Hustlemania 3, which is also happening around the Super 8 tournament. I don't know if
The week before, September 12th.
and so that's happening, and that's also another big wrestling weekend because there's an event on the 11th that's going to be a good one, and then Hustlemania 3 is happening, and you're going up against Lucky 13, and I think he just had a great match this weekend or this past weekend, and so what is that like? Because Hustlemania 3 looks really good. Obviously there's a lot of respect to Danny Havoc, I want to say, and everything he's done. That's going to be around that show. And just to be even in that and Matt Tremont's promotion and what he's doing. So, what is that like to even be invited into that promotion?
It was kind of weird at first because it's definitely like a deathmatch hardcore wrestling promotion, which I am the exact opposite of that. I kind of feel like Matt Tremont wants to see Lucky get beat up as bad as I want to beat up Lucky. If that makes sense. I can't see any other reason why Matt Tremont was interested in bringing me in, other than Matt Tremont's a super hardworking guy, and maybe there's a mutual respect of, hey, like, we've never really crossed paths before, but we've both been working our tails off for just as long, and kind of at the same goal. So maybe it's a mutual sign of respect that he's given me this opportunity, or he just also really hates Lucky and wants to see me beat up Lucky.
And then it'll probably be a good warm up match for that tournament. Let's put it that way.
I mean, for all I know, I'm wrestling Tremont the next weekend at Super 8. So there's that too. Maybe Tremont, I didn't even think about that. Maybe Tremont's got some kind of plan to take me out before Super 8 happens.
Or maybe he doesn't want he doesn't want you to take an L so badly.
It's possible. I'm not taking any L's though.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Because you got to win one of these tournaments. It's about time. It's about time.
It's 2 tournaments.
Hopefully two, but we'll take one. I'll take one. Seeing you win one of these tournaments. I'm just saying. I know when not to be greedy. Is my point. And so obviously we spoke about a lot of stuff. Some other stuff's coming out there. I don't know what's been announced. I don't know what hasn't been announced. That's kind of the main stuff that's coming down the pike. And obviously COVID is still in effect. We're seeing it with St. Louis Anarchy, what's going on with their Spalding tournament right now, with it being delayed and them playing around with a lot of stuff. So anything could happen in the wrestling world from now to anything. So I just want to make it clear to anybody watching that this isn't set in stone, but this is what's scheduled as it sits at the moment. Obviously, the Super 8's been moved around tremendously 3 times, right? If I'm correct.
Yeah, I was going to say it was initially March and then June and now September. And again, it's promoters making safe choices. They're not trying to cram anything in. They're trying to be as safe as possible so that we can all enjoy this thing we love. That's probably why they made the move to put it on IWTV, so that more people can enjoy it from the safety and the comfort of their own living room.
And so I think that kind of brings us to a point with everything where we spoke about a bunch of stuff. We skipped a lot of stuff. There's 14 plus years of matches. So if some stuff, and I'm going to give everybody a fair warning, if some stuff seems a little rushed, there was a reason why. There's too much to talk about. But I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. Where can people find you on social media? I know you have a Twitter. I don't know if you have a Facebook page. I don't know if you have a TikTok or Instagram or a Twitch or Where can people buy your merchandise? Because that's how you support wrestlers right now in the middle of COVID if you have extra cash.
I got Twitter and Instagram. They're both at Very Good Pro Res. That's as many letters as they would let me fit into one of those, so I had to shorten it down a little bit. So that's at Very Good Pro Res, Twitter and Instagram. I do have I had printed during COVID like maskless Dasher Hatfield T-shirts that I have like 13 of left, and my wife won't let me get Very Good Pro Wrestler ones till I sell these. So buy those from me. I sell them and mail them myself. I like to keep all my own money. So slide in my DMs anywhere at any time, and I'll gladly mail you a T-shirt. They're $20, $5 shipping. But yeah, I need to sell those. If you want a Very Good Pro Wrestling T-shirt or Pro Wrestler T-shirt, I got to sell those first. So help me out. Get those out of my garage, and then I'll get some Very Good Pro Wrestler T-shirts.
And you can just shoot him a DM on Twitter. I think you can message still on Instagram. It's been a while since I've dealt with anybody on Instagram. So I
Yeah,
think
those are
those
less
two
frequent.
places.
Occasionally.
So go buy his merch. And I've been saying this with everybody is that my position, and I hope you agree with me, is that you should take care of your family first, everybody. So if you have extra cash, and obviously COVID hit everybody hard, I've noticed things in the sector I'm in, which is comic books, and I've noticed things with virtual cons that didn't exist 2 months ago, where cash is getting tight for certain people and certain things that are happening. So if you have extra money, that's when you buy somebody's t-shirt, and that's when you support a wrestler. But you should take care of your family first. But having said all that, there's no excuse now not to follow somebody on Twitter or Instagram or comment on their Twitter or Instagram. And the only excuse you have at this point is if you don't have internet or electricity. And if that's the case, please contact me for two reasons. A, I want to know how you're watching me. And B, I will help you because clearly, if you don't have electricity or internet, you need help more than I do. But again, there's no excuse anymore for not following somebody on Twitter, Instagram. Both those platforms are free. There's no excuse for not liking a post. There's no excuse that if you have IWTV and you're not live tweeting, or even not live tweeting, but throwing a tweet or two at somebody, no excuse, because that stuff matters. And it's very important at this stage in the game during this crisis to follow people, retweet their stuff, because it lets IWTV know, it lets the wrestler know, it lets the promotion know, and chances are they're going to retweet you, like you, or comment back to you in some fashion. Black Label Pro on that shows, the Eric Stevens show, and we're back, retweeted me and liked about 120 of my posts that I tweeted out that day. So that should give you an idea that these companies are very active right now on social media to everybody out there, and a variety of wrestlers are active as well. Not during their match, because that'd be crazy, but usually after. So that's all I'm going to say to everybody, but support indie wrestling. As always, support your favorite wrestlers because they need it more than ever, and it's not just money anymore.
Well said, brother.
And then I think that's a wrap.